morning students. Today we'll start second part of the chapter Tribals, Dikus and the Vision of a Golden Age. In the previous video we discussed about the tribals and Dikus people, and some things we discussed about Birsa Munda and the tribal revolts. Clear? Today in this video we will discuss about three main topics. Under how did colonial rule affect tribal lives, right? That the colonial people, the British in India, they passed some laws and acts due to which the tribal lives affected badly. Clear? So in this video we will discuss about three main points. Number one is what happened to tribal chiefs due to the rules, colonial rules. Second, what happened means what was the impact on shifting cultivators, and three, what was the main impact of forest laws on the tribal people. So let's start. What happened to tribal chiefs? Who were tribal chiefs? Tribal chiefs were the headmen of tribal people, headmen of tribal groups. Clear? So those headmen were having the power before the British came in India. When during the British rule and before the British rule, the situation or the condition of tribal chiefs were different. Clear? So before the British, they had economic and administrative powers, and they had their own police, and they decided on the local rules and regulations of land. They also had the power to manage forest, or we can say that forest management. So in this way, before the British came, or before the impact of British in the tribal regions, the chiefs of the tribal groups were having a lot of powers. What kind of power we have discussed here? They also had the economic powers, they had the administrative powers, and they used to control their regions. They used to control their people. They used to control the rules and regulations for the forest management and their regional management. So in this way they had lot of powers before British. But after British, when British controlled the particular area in tribal regions, and a colonial government controlled the rules and regulations, so during the British rule they lost their powers. They were not allowed to have all the powers regarding economy and the administration. Just they were suppressed by the British or colonial rule, and they had to follow the colonial rules fixed by the British government, and some of them had to pay tribute to the British. So in this way their condition was completely changed, right? So this was the first impact of the colonial rule on the tribal groups. Getting my point? On the tribal groups, especially on the tribal chiefs. This was the main impact. That as conclusion we can say that before they were having the powers, but after the British colonial rule, during this period they had lost their powers. So now let's discuss next topic. Next topic is what happened to the shifting cultivators. We discussed about that the impact of the colonial rule on tribal chiefs. Now we'll discuss the impact on shifting cultivators. Means the people in the previous video we discussed about the people who used to involve in the shifting cultivation or jhum cultivation. I also told you that different names are there of shifting cultivation in India. For example, Dhya, Penda, Kumri, Bevar, etc. So jhum cultivation, especially this is the name of shifting cultivation in northeast of India. Shifting cultivators, those people were involved in the shifting cultivation, means they used to clear the land after growing crops, harvesting the crop. They used to leave that land as fallow, and they changed the land, they shifted the agricultural land to another place, right? So this was the shifting cultivation, means they used to move for cultivation from one place to another place. They used to shift continuously their agricultural land. So what was the problem for the British after the setting up of colonial rule in the tribal regions? First of all, they wanted tribal groups to settle down, right? It means they wanted to check or prevent the shifting cultivation. Why? Because the British used to consider the tribal people, those who used to move from one place to another place, very suspicious, and they did not have the belief on these kinds of people. So they wanted tribal groups, all the tribal groups, those who are involved in shifting cultivation, to settle down at one place. And what could be the benefit for the British for this? If they settle down at one place, they became the peasants or the settlement cultivators. So it was easier to control peasants. Those who settle down at one place could be controlled, and administration could become very easy. And after that, the British used to get the revenue from the peasants, those who used to do the cultivation at one place after settle down. So regular revenue collection became easier for the British. So two big benefits for British of settle down of tribal groups. Number one, easier to control the peasants, those who are settled down. And second thing, now they could get the regular revenue supply. Clear? So these two benefits were there for the British. So the British wanted to make them settled, all the tribal groups, but they could not do whatever they wanted. The British wanted to settle down all the tribal groups, but most of the tribal groups were settled, but many of them could not settle down at one place due to so many problems. In northeast, especially in northeast region, Jhum cultivators they were not settled down due to many problems. For example, plough cultivation was not easy in the dry regions due to the scarce rainfall, low annual rainfall, and dry regions. In these kinds of areas, Jhum cultivation was it was favorable, but plough cultivation was not easy. Clear? So they could not deposit the revenue, right? And they could not follow all the economic rules set up by the British. So in this way, this was about the shifting cultivators and what happened to the shifting cultivators. This was the topic in which we discussed about that what British wanted and what in fact happened. So many Jhum cultivators protested against the British, against this practice, right? Against the policy of the colonial rule, and they did not settle down, and they continuously were doing the shifting cultivation. So the British also allowed some of the groups of Jhum cultivators to continue this cultivation. Now we'll discuss next topic. The next topic is forest laws and their impact. During the colonial rule, the British wanted to control over the forest and the people living in the forest. So due to which they passed some laws and acts which were known as Forest Acts. For example, the first Forest Act was passed, Indian Forest Act, in 1865. Indian Forest Act. Indian Forest Act. Forest Act. And after that, one more act was passed in 1878 and then 1927. These Indian Forest Acts were passed. According to the Act 1878, the Forest Act, forests were controlled by the British completely, and these forests were divided into three parts. Which three parts? Number one, reserved forests. Reserved forest. Number two, protected forest, and number three, village forest. So in this way, into three categories, these forests were divided. You know that tribal people, in the beginning of the chapter we discussed that tribal people were completely dependent on the forest. Forests were like their homes. They used to live there, they used to collect different commodities, they used to earn their livelihood, and they used to spend their whole life in the forest. But now, due to the Forest Acts, the British or colonial government controlled forest and completely annexed all the forest. Clear? And divided or categorized into three categories. Reserved forest, These were most important forests because these provided a timber and sleepers for railway. Due to the railway expansion, the British got the wood and timber from these kinds of forest for sleepers, laying down the railway tracks. Sleepers means between two railway lines, these are laying down vertical, horizontal wood logs. These are known as sleepers. Understand? Earlier these sleepers were made of wood, and now with the stone and with metallic iron material etc. are used. So reserved forests were most important because they used to provide timber. In these forests, the tribal people were not allowed to collect the fruits, to hunt, to collect other commodities, and shifting cultivation also was completely prohibited in reserved forest. Now you can think that what happened to those people who are completely dependent on these kinds of activities. They used to get their food from the forest. They used to do the shifting cultivation for their livelihood. So what happened to those people, you can think. Protected forest were another forest with some kinds of permissions. They used to collect the commodities from the protected forest, and village forest were the forest near about the villages, and these were not for the tribal people because there were no specific villages for tribal people. So village forests were completely for the settled communities. So in this way, this was Indian Forest Act, according to which the forests were categorized into three parts. So what happened to the tribal people? As we have discussed that bad impacts were on tribal people, but one impact was on British also. What impact? As we have discussed that due to the expansion of railways, they needed sleepers, and for that they needed labor and services from the people living in the forest. Those forest dwellers used to live in the forest, and they needed their services to cut the trees and to load the trees and timber for supplying to the particular areas where they required sleepers. Understand? For this purpose, now because tribal people were expelled from the forest, now they were pushed out from the forest, so now they did not have any kinds of labor. So labor shortage faced by the British. Now the British faced the shortage of the services by the forest dwellers. So what did they do? They found a solution. What solution they found? That some of the people, those who were forest dwellers, were allowed to do the shifting cultivation, and they were provided with some patches of land by the British government, right? In place of, right, that they would provide their services for the forest department. It means now some of the Jhum cultivators, some of the tribal people used to give the services, used to provide their services to cut the trees and to load the timber for supplying to the British, right? But in place of that, they were provided with some land for Jhum cultivation. So this was about the impact on the tribal people, as well as little impact was on British. So this was about forest laws and their impact. So dear students, in this video we discussed three topics. What means under the main topic, how did colonial rule affect tribal lives, right? How did colonial rule affect tribal lives? Tribal lives were affected due to the colonial rule, and with the 3 points we discussed this, that what was the impact on shifting cultivators, clear, and what was the impact on the forest laws and their impact, and another we discussed that what was the impact on tribal chiefs. So in this way, in this video we discuss the topic. Whatever, you have to revise this topic by reading in the PDF and watch this video again. If you have any doubt, you can ask me by writing in the comment box. Thank you. Have a nice day.